feature presentation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, we're talking about the thing we love to talk about most this time of year. The fall festival season has arrived, so why not talk about Fan Expo?
Yeah, we already did our TIFF preview. So if you go like, hey guys, what happened to TIFF Talk? Well, if you missed it, we did like a 2.5 hour episode previewing the entire 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, which I'm sure we will talk about more on this episode. But yes, today we are going to talk about Fan Expo. Both Eric and I, and my lovely wife Nevis headed down to Fan Expo, went for a couple days, checked out all the booths. We went to a panel. We'll talk about all that. My wife helped produce some stuff for us and like help us go to some things. So it was a fun time, and we're going to talk about everything we saw, as well as what I think is going to be the most interesting conversation is we went to a panel for Cobra Kai
Very on
with
brand.
William. But they weren't allowed to talk about Cobra Kai. So,
we don't talk about Fight Club. We don't talk about Cobra Kai.
So that was interesting. And we'll talk about that. Cause I think like that made for it's making for, interesting events because there's celebrities are still coming in for things, but they kind of have to dance around talking about anything from a struck company, meaning Netflix, Amazon, Disney, like the major studios. Essentially, if they have anything for those studios, they can't talk about that stuff. So tons of celebrities were there, tons of panels happened, signings happened, you could pay to get photos with people. But we ended up seeing William Zabka, as well as the man, the myth, the legend, the Karate Kid himself,
Ralph Macchio.
Ralph Macchio. Eric, thank you. I was just waiting to get you to participate. I know you're a big Ralph Macchio guy.
Oh,
and
huge.
Yuji Okamoto, who plays this Cho-sun, was also there. So Eric, how are you though on this fine Sunday afternoon?
Matt, I'm tired. We've gone through a lot. This is inside baseball kind of stuff, but we're preparing for TIFF. We're at the end of the Labor Day weekend. This is the best time to record. But like last year, if you've been following along, we were too ambitious with our preparations. We were like, we'll start the day early and record a bunch of TIFF reviews and curtain raisers and other things that'll kind of get sort of banked, but we'll have it ready to go when the time is right, and it'll be us both in audio form and video, because a lot of our TIFF reviews as we're recording the show during the festival is sort of on the fly, and Matt was nice enough to buy these really beautiful mics that sound great and will maybe add a little bit more quality to the experience, but still not remove the extra texture of the street level recording
on the street.
It'll still have a little mustard or hot sauce to it, but just in terms of where we are now, there's still a large mountain to climb or to get over, and we're at that bottom stage still, or bottoms, because we just
Speaking of
record
bottoms, you
bottoms.
can listen to our bottoms review.
But it's also I think it's always fun to talk about this stuff because one, we have an affinity for it. We love what we love what we do. But there is another part of it where it's like, okay, it takes some time. You have to find, not only the time to record, but I think also you have to you have to have that energy, and sometimes you do feel like, oh God, like,
we've already each seen 10 TIFF movies, I think, or more. I think I'm at 11. I mean, if you minus the half movies that I didn't finish watching, it evens out to be about 10. We've seen 10 films already for TIFF. We just finished Fan Expo. We've been go, 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 go. But it is my favorite time of the year. It is that end of summer. Um, when Fan Expo is here, it always means that TIFF is around the corner. And even though we should be saving our energy for the festival, there's just something about Fan Expo that I kind of love doing every year. And Saturday is its own special hell, like where it's so busy in there. You can barely get from one hall to another. There's just swarms of people. It's hot, it's sweaty. But if you go on Thursday during the preview hours or maybe later in the evening, or if you go Friday later in the evening, which we ended up being there, it ended up being, pretty chill because it felt like Friday people go during the day and then they leave around dinner time. And then you have that nighttime on a Friday evening to walk around. And it was pretty solid. Like, I love going. I love checking out the booths every year. It is kind of, that 1-2 punch with Fan Expo and TIFF is always exhausting, like we said, but it is a blast. Like it for me, I used to go and do more panels, and I was super into comic books. And I think what's so great about Fan Expo, people watching, seeing the cosplayers, there's something for everyone there. I feel like if you're super into trading card games, if you're super into collecting, if you're super into just brands, if you're a video game person, if you're a comic book person, like
Fudge and
it
power tools.
yeah, there is a fudge booth every year. There was a power tool booth if you want to join the Marines. It seems like a strange place to do that at, but hey, they're there. And that's what I mean by like it not being a comic book convention. It's not Comic Con, it's Fan Expo. And that fan is an overarching, you can be a fan of so many different things. Like the celebrities that they bring in range, they're usually from some sort of, genre thing with horror or comic booky
Sci-fi.
or sci-fi, things like that, which is classic when you get at these conventions. But I really do think that Fan Expo, usually it's the, jack of all trades, master of none thing when you try to cover too much and you don't have an identity. But like Fan Expo has done a good job. It's still just a big dork convention, right? And I mean that in the most sincere and genuine way. Like I'm a big dork and I love going to the big dork convention. Like
That's what they should call it, the Big Dork
I
Convention.
I really do. Like I love seeing, nerds and dorks in their element. Like it's just whatever you're a huge fan of. Like if you love cosplaying, you're going to go all out and you're going to dress up, or maybe you just do half-assed cosplay, which is also very funny. And like so there's such a range from every angle that it's always kind of fun to check it out. And having Nevis come this year and help us out, she was there her first time. I said, why don't you come help us out? You can kind of look around and give it a different perspective and let us know what you liked and find things for us to check out and do as a producer. So she obviously clearly knew that Eric and she's a big Cobra Kai fan as well. So she kind of was like, we have to go do this. She saw all the art in Artist Alley, which kind of made Eric and I go up and down and look at every we went to a lot of different art booths and we met up with our friend Ryan Hancock and stuff too. So, yeah, well, I don't know where we want to start, Eric. I mean,
Well, another
but how
caveat
did you?
I think
Yeah,
you should
please.
add to this is that and something that I don't know if you guys really looked at it too much, but because also Nevis being a producer on this and someone that kind of introduced you to a new world of reality TV, but having
Oh yeah,
Vanderpump Rules
yeah.
being incorporated into the
See, and that's what I
fandom of
mean by like
things.
that's such an interesting thing that you wouldn't expect. Unfortunately, Nevis and I had to go to a bridal shower in Oshawa, so we couldn't go to the Vanderpump Rules podcast that they had recording with Peter from Vanderpump Rules, who is a manager at Sir Restaurant and Lounge. Eric, do you know what Sir stands for?
uh Service.
Sexy unique restaurant.
Oh
So
God.
Peter was there. Yeah, so we weren't able to do that, but that was another thing that Nevis pointed out. And that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, where you don't think it would like fit a classic Comic Con kind of thing, right? But they really are trying to kind of widen who they appeal to and try to appeal to everyone, which I think is really, really interesting. Eric, how did you feel this year? Because you've been a few times, right? I
Yeah,
remember
well,
being
it's always been with you, because beforehand I hadn't been to Fan Expo or many comic related conventions or anything like that. The closest I think I ever came to anything like this was, I've been to the Pickering flea market a couple of times when I was younger and looking for
definitely
certain
not the same,
things.
but
No, 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 no.
but
But
similar.
the
I
idea of
get what
like
you mean with all the
having,
markets and stuff, like all
yeah,
the vendors,
and
vendors.
that's
Yeah,
what it, yeah, no
the
Vim
Vim
vendors.
vendors. That's at TIFF. That's a
Yes,
different fest.
but that's what it kind of reminded me, at least with like some of the floors where like you can go to these kind of pop-up shops, and some of them are, name brands, and some of them are, independently owned, and some of them are sponsored by things like eBay. So you can go to these places and look for things, whether they be collectibles or, trading cards or anything that kind of is sort of something maybe that's specific to your interest. I think there's going to be something there. And I always kind of like that, and what you were saying before, I think the creativity of the people putting effort into their costumes or finding things that maybe you wouldn't expect to. Like, there was, I think my standout one this year was seeing somebody dressed up as Seymour and holding an Audrey 2 plant, and just thinking that that was really well done. And the creativity and enthusiasm, I think, is infectious and wonderful to a certain degree. But there's also things about, like, if you're not a person that loves crowds, it is, like you
Yeah.
were saying, it's best to kind of go early in the day on that Thursday or Friday morning to avoid it, because there is that social awareness of like moving from one location to another, especially if you get
It
caught.
gets claustrophobic at times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if something catches your eye and you kind of want to like spend time like actually looking for something specifically. Like, I was looking for the brain gremlin the day that I was there, because last year I saw one and I kind of put it off, and I was like, I don't want to spend that much money and things like that. But I kind of was like haunted by regret, weirdly. So if you're looking for something and you're kind of like strolling through sections, it's hard to browse in a way, because you're always both trying to look for the thing you're after, but at the same time you don't want to stand in one spot for too long, because it's really hard to find a place to just kind of like situate yourself. It's just a lot to take in. So I think like that is something to consider if you're not a fan of, those kind of crowded situations. But I think this year it was a little bit better in terms of like it wasn't low key, but you didn't have this screaming contest thing that was a little
Yeah.
obnoxious. I think somebody that actually put it really well was when we were on Cinema Scene, and Shaquille was talking to us about, it's almost like weirdly paying a premium to go into these boutiques and these kind of marketplaces in order to pay for things that are still the same price.
Yeah, I
It's
think I even brought that up too.
yeah.
Yeah, that might have been me, but like I do find that interesting because you could go to these shops or these places and not have to pay the ticket to get into Fan Expo and probably buy some of the stuff that's on sale for probably cheaper, because I'm sure they mark some of it up, right? Because they're trying to capitalize on people's fandoms, which is totally fair. I get that. And all of these people are independent businesses for the most part. You do have like the Sunrise records, and they're still even pretty independent. You don't have like a Walmart booth, or there used to be an EB Games booth and stuff like that
No
where they're
GameSpot
selling.
this year.
Yeah, no GameSpot this year, which is interesting. But you do get the big companies, but they're usually doing promo stuff. So we did check out some of the bigger booths as well, because I did find that this is the first year since the pandemic that it's felt like more of a normal Fan Expo or a bigger Fan Expo again, because I did feel like last year there was a lack of like big sponsorships or big booths and stuff like that. Like, I did feel like there was less on the floor, where this year you saw Paramount Plus had a big booth, Crunchyroll had a big booth, Prime Video had a big booth, PlayStation had a big booth, Xbox had a booth, Bandai Namco, which was there last year, but they had their toy booth with a lot of Dragon Ball toys and stuff like that. You had eBay, Wattpad, and things like that. So that felt different this year. You had a clothing brand called Roosevelt's had 2 booths. Great shirts, $95 Canadian. I wish they were cheaper. Let us know if you want,
Sponsorship.
yeah. I love their shirts. It's just like, 95 Canadian for one is a lot, but they're beautiful kind of button up short sleeve shirts. So there's some cool stuff this year. Um and then you have all kind of the normal stuff like all the independent, comic books and video game shops and all the signings and things like that. So let's go through what we saw, Eric. So we did go to the Paramount Lodge. So Paramount Plus built a kind of a lodge setup, which is kind of like a ski lodge. I love it from a conceptual point of view. I like when these companies kind of really think out, okay, let's do something big and have like a theme or a vibe to what we're doing, instead of just being like, all right, we have this big spot, let's just do something super generic and whatever. So I like that they had a theming to it. So we went into the lodge. They give you like a ski pass kind of lanyard thing where they gave you a free week or free month of Paramount Plus.
So all you
Um,
Twisted Metal fans out there can
yeah,
watch.
Twisted Metal in Canada is on Paramount Plus. So we have this, which is the I don't if you're watching the video version,
Oh
they
yeah,
gave us this
it's in
little thing.
focus. Sweet.
And we went into the lodge and they had kind of photo booths or promo things for Twisted Metal, Yellowstone, uh,
Which is the best
uh,
one.
um, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, Star Trek. It might have been Discovery or Brave New Worlds. One of the Star Trek shows that they have. There's a lot of them now, and then they also had that was it, right? And then you could go take a picture with the Ninja Turtles and
Oh yeah,
SpongeBob, I think
yeah.
was as one of them as well.
Or you could dip your
Um,
hands in the ooze.
in the ooze and stuff
And
like
that I
that.
think was
So
of that section or of that booth was the most popular, especially with kids and grown-ups who grew up with the turtles, where when we were walking through the the
yeah,
Yellowstone section was kind of vacated
yeah.
completely.
It yeah, because Twisted Metal and Ninja Turtles were more of kind of a visual experience. They weren't like photo ops. You could go take your photo with them. They had like statues of all the Ninja Turtles, and then they had like a bunch of CRT TVs. I think there was a little bit of a Walmart sponsorship there because they had Great Value pizzas that had Ninja Turtle branding on them and stuff like that. But then I liked all the CRT TVs that was playing either action figure commercials or Ninja Turtle footage. They had some of the action figures lying around and stuff like that. And then Twisted Metal, they had Sweet Tooth's ice cream truck. They had the sign for Las Vegas, I think, as well. Um, and then in Yellowstone, you had just like a chair by a
It was just
fireplace. Is that
basically
what
a
it was? Like
cabin, like the
a
inside of a
cabin, yeah.
cabin.
Which is or I guess a ranch or whatever. And then for Star Trek, it was like the bridge that you could sit at, I believe.
Yeah.
And then they actually had people in. I think SpongeBob was there at one point, and the Ninja Turtles from Mutant Mayhem, all 4 of them. You could do a photo op with the turtles. So pretty cool. Like it was quick, but like I appreciate that Paramount put the most effort into their booth this year, which I want to give them a special shout out for that.
I agree. It kind of felt like the other boosts when it came to the film and television side of things, especially Prime, Amazon
Primes was
was lacking. It
yeah,
was almost like there was nothing there. The only thing that was really the big takeaway was their loot bags, which you could just like grab a bag,
right, yeah.
from them, and if you need to put whatever you're buying there, it's free. So that was about it. And you understand that more for like a smaller company or studio, but Amazon and Amazon Prime, they're one of the biggest businesses out there right now, whether it be in film, television, products, shipping. Like
Mhm.
it's like why you know it felt a little bit cheap.
It was a big booth. So to describe it, it was basically they had 3 lanes and they had photo ops or photo booths for Invincible, The Boys, and The Wheel of Time, right? Was the third one, I
Yeah.
believe. And it was a big corner booth. Like it was very big, but once you went in, the Invincible one had basically like the destroyed city from like the end of Invincible season 1, and then they had cosplayers who were dressing as Mark Grayson Invincible and Adam Eve. And it's no, if it's this isn't any offense to the cosplayers, because I'm sure they either found these people or they just gave them these costumes, but like
Or they're hired
it,
actors, right?
or
Like,
they're hired and but
yeah.
like the costumes that they were given and just the whole vibe of it felt very it wasn't up to what I expected it would be. Like, at least on the Invincible side. For the boys, it was very bright, and it was the biggest, most prominent one out of the three, but it really was Vought Tower. It made it look like you were on the top floor of Vought Tower on like a basically the desk, like one of the, or maybe it was the whatever they're called in the boys. I love the boys, but I forget because it's all satire of Avengers and Justice League. So the Seven, I think they're called. So I think it was like their table that they all sit at, and you could like sit at the table where the Seven, which is kind of like the Justice League headquarters kind of thing for the boys in a really twisted, fucked up way. So you could sit there, and it looks like you're on the top floor of that. And then for the Wheel of Time, they had some like trees and shit set up or something. So like I
You
don't
can
know
tell we're
anything about the
fans.
Wheel of Time, sorry.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it all looked like a little bit, I like, maybe when you went and if you got your photo taken, maybe it looked cool, I'm not sure, but from the outside it didn't. It just looked kind of like not a little cheap for a company that, when Paramount's was only 2 booths over, right? Even Crunchyroll had a lot of
Or
pomp and
PlayStation.
circumstance. Yeah, PlayStation, which we'll get to in a sec, but like um it just felt like it was shoved in the corner, and that it I don't know. It
It's like a bunch of
wasn't
Amazon
great.
boxes that are put in a
Yeah.
corner, just meant to
Yeah,
sit
yeah.
there for days and days or months or years.
And I love Invincible and the Boys, so like you didn't really have to sell me on either of those, but I would have liked something cool from both of those.
I mean, missed opportunity here, Matt. There should have been a Citadel experience.
Yeah, that's what everyone was asking for. And Lord of the Rings, right? It's not like they gave up on that shit right away. On either of those. Oh my god. Moving on. You already brought up the PlayStation booth, so we can bring that up. They had promotion for Spider-Man 2, which is coming out very soon. I think in October. Sorry, we're not the
Octoben, please.
Spider-Man 2 PS5 is coming out on, that's a great question, Matt, when everyone's screaming, October 20th. So we're getting pretty close. Like, we're only basically a month and a half away,
Are you
or
excited
just,
about it?
I am.
Yeah.
Loved Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS4, PS5. There's been a million Spider-Man stories at this point, but I felt like they did a pretty good job of making it their own in that first game. Familiar, but still, Spider-Man video games have always been fun to play, like to swing around, and they've just done like Insomniac, the developers of it, have just done like a really good job to make those games really fun to play and swing around the city or do the missions and stuff like that. So they had a big Spider-Man 2 booth where you could take a photo with both Peter and Miles in their costumes. They were just statues, but they had the big Spider-Man 2 logo, and it was like basically you could stand in between them and get your photo. They also had like because Venom's in the game, so they had like kind of a Venom, like inky, like symbiote kind of fountain thing where you could walk up to it and it would kind of like form around your shadow and stuff like that. It was kind of cool, but we didn't really scope it out too much. And then they had the new PS5 Spider-Man 2 system, as well as the controller there. So nothing where you could play. PlayStation used to have a big booth where you could go up and play their new games and stuff like that, and like
Like
demo
video and
them.
arcade top 10.
Yeah, exactly. So, but nothing like that. You could go up and take your photo and look around, and they had some video screens playing like the trailer on loop. But still, nonetheless, like that photo booth, I'd prefer something like that and something out in the open than what we're just gonna keep dumping on Prime. Like, So like we're just like, Bezos, you got the money, just like a little
Yeah.
bit more to put into your Fan Expo booth. That's
The
all that we're
divorce broke him.
asking.
Let's be real.
Um,
God, he's so bad.
yeah. And then where do you want to go? Like the Bandai Namco booth, we checked out the Dragon Ball toys, obviously, again.
Yeah.
Uh, there were some cool Spider-Verse toys at the Bandai Namco booth. Crunchyroll, we didn't really go into. They had the show that they were promoting. Um, I wasn't, it's an anime that I know a lot of people like, but I just I'm not super familiar with it. So we didn't really need to go um, check out Crunchyroll, but I do appreciate that their booth looked bumping, looked like they put a lot of effort into it. They had like a whole, it was Jujutsu Kaisen that they were promoting, and I think you could even go in and either maybe watch a preview for it because it must be coming out soon, like a new season or something like that. But their booth was pretty cool. What else did we check out,
We
Eric?
saw the Touchwood Lionsgate
Yeah,
Cineplex
yeah.
Hunger Games prequel setup and Saw 10
So
with
they had
Billy.
Billy the puppet was there. Eric and I took some photos with Billy the puppet. They had a couple costumes from the new Hunger Games movie. Tweedledee Fiddlesticks was not there to take photos with everyone. So it was just some costumes, and they had like a logo treatment. And then they also had something from Expendables, but I don't even remember if I saw anything or if it was just like an ad for it or posters they were giving out or something like that.
Yeah.
Not like I'll give them a pass because it's licensed to Canadian, PR companies. I bumped into my old boss Lauren, who runs a PR company here in Toronto, and um, like it was pretty standard of what you'd need to do to just kind of promote some movies you have coming up. It was nothing crazy, but it was, at least they had a couple costumes and they had the Saw puppet there. So what else can you ask for? I would have liked like a whole recreation of the Saw bathroom, but hey, maybe the movie's still coming later this month. Maybe my dream can still come true.
Maybe Tobin Bell, if it wasn't for the
The
SAG
SAG
strike,
strike.
would have been there,
Yeah. Yeah.
eating some
Um,
fudge and buying some power tools. Tobin
we get
Bell.
those are
just
the two
just
most.
doing like
Yeah.
I'm getting
We
ready for
couldn't
my
get
next victim.
we couldn't get over the power tools and the fudge. The fudge, I guess I get, people hungry, they want some candy, they want
But
some
who eats
sugar.
that
So like,
much fudge? Like fudge is
yeah.
something like you get a sample size, which is for free, and then you kind of move on. Like I remember as a
Yeah.
kid always
Or
going
you
to
buy it
Niagara
like the
Falls.
CNE. Yeah. You buy it somewhere like that. Like I wouldn't expect at like a Fan Expo to buy some fudge. But hey, maybe it's a hot thing at these places. So
Hot fudge at Fan
hot
Expo.
fudge. The power tools was the weirdest one. They like promoted it as like a cosplay repair booth. Like, but it was really just like selling, not even selling, I think just promoting their power tools. But then I'm not in the cosplay world either. So maybe I know when you make your own cosplay, you do need a lot of different things to like,
Put
you
it
know,
together.
put it together. So maybe I'm just out of the loop and these are the power tools that a lot of cosplayers use, or maybe someone at that company was like, you know what we need to pivot to? Cosplayers. And then someone was like, sure, Jim, go for it. Let's see if that
His
works.
name is Jim.
Um
Or you know what? Like the way that you're describing it, even though it didn't happen, it kind of would have been cool if they had like a booth within the power tool side of things, and it almost was like a pit crew, where like if somebody's costume like needed repairs or something, they'd come in and then they'd like tune them up before they go out to walk around again.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what they were doing. They
Oh, they
had
were,
that,
because I
but I
didn't see
don't
any of
know.
that.
No, I didn't see it, but I think they had some stuff. They're like, hey, if you need to come fix your costume, you can come do it here. So I think that was their whole premise, but I just didn't see anyone taking part of that. Um, Disney had a booth for Ahsoka, which was perfect timing because Ahsoka premiered the day before, right? I
Yeah,
believe. Yeah.
the
On
first
the
two
Wednesday,
episodes.
the first two episodes, which you guys can check out our review of those two episodes on Untitled Movie Reviews. So they had a booth set up for Ahsoka where, actually, for being, I don't know if it was last minute or they must have just known that it was the day after the premiere. Like, I didn't know they were going to have a booth there. And it was pretty good. Like it was basic, but to promote Ahsoka, they had a lot of different props and costume pieces, and they have the Loth cat. They had
Big highlight.
the full Loth cat, whether it was the I don't know if it was an actual puppet or if it was just a statue
Or
kind
like
of
a model of
version
it.
of it, model of it. That was really cool. They had all the different lightsabers from the different characters in the show. So you saw their hilts. You saw Sabine's helmet. You saw some costume pieces. Like, it was set up. It was, again, very simple. And it reminded me of like when I went to that theater, the El Capitan in Los Angeles, where whenever you go see a screening there, whatever movie's playing, they have a lot of the real costumes and different things from that. So it reminded me of that.
Well,
Pretty
even
well
the
done.
lighting within the
Yeah.
cases I thought was nice, and it was kind of super slick and
Yeah.
very specific, obviously, to that one show and that one show only. But at least it kind of it was like you're saying, it was hitting at that right time where it was like, okay, people are just having watched those first two episodes and it's fresh in their memories and it's something that's happening now. So it kind of felt like of the moment, and people kind of were, I think, kind of caught up in that. And also, just when you see something that is kind of adorable like that cat, it just adds something to it, I think.
Absolutely. So then they also had like a 360 photo booth where they would give you, I think, two lightsabers, like Ahsoka's lightsabers, and they would do one of those videos that circles around you really quickly. Eric and I, not big photo guys, are waiting in line for things, so we did not do the
We didn't get
360
soaked.
photos. The eBay booth, Wattpad, pretty standard stuff. Like, um, eBay being there every year is interesting. I don't know if they do like live auctions or something like that, but we don't really hang around that booth too much. There was a Stack TV carnival. Stack TV in Canada here is like I think kind of like a streaming package you can get, which gives you some cable channels here in Canada, like Global and things like that. So they were promoting like Survivor and I feel like a few animated series and things like that. So,
It's kind of a little
um,
cross section of stuff because there's a lot of syndication shows that Stacked kind of has. I know this because every time I go over to my grandparents, that's the stuff they're watching.
yeah,
It's like
it's like
Showcase and things like,
HGTV and
yeah.
Showcase and like all those kind of Canadian versions of some of things that play a lot of either repeats or just kind of home and garden stuff and some reality TV I think is on there as well. Um, so yeah, and that was kind of like the main south building because it's always
Retro
split
Kid
up
as
into
well, right? Was there, and
Retro Kid was there,
yeah.
which they go with the Roosevelt set. Yeah, nothing there this year that I think they were launching a Sesame Street uh line, so they had Cookie Monster and Elmo there at one point. Um
You can never forgive Elmo.
um
Cookie Monster's great still.
yeah. Other than that, I think that were like the big things, right? Like Xbox's booth was mostly a kind of like a I don't know if they were doing much like PC Game Pass kind of thing. Um, and then the retailers, like I was looking for a copy of Mario RPG, but couldn't find it for a good price. Nevis bought some great art. She bought a Sailor Moon print, um, which is like modern, like Sailor Moon, like if they were living in 2023, which I think was cool, and from another great artist as well. And then in the the north building, our friends at Layered Butter had a great booth where they were selling their Studio Ghibli Legend of Zelda poster. They were selling a Twin Peaks. Was it Twin Peaks: The Return or just Twin Peaks in general?
I think it was a little bit of everything, but there was a
Yeah,
lot of return stuff, and then they also are celebrating their Wes Anderson line that's kind of coming out now, and I think that's the next magazine or volume as well. So yeah, it was kind of cool seeing them there because like of how big they've gotten over the last couple of years, and how the curation of their work has really drawn a lot of attention on the art side of things.
yeah. No, they're doing great stuff over there. They've taken the what Mondo is doing, but putting a shout out to Mark Weingust and everyone over there. We know Mark because we bump into him all the time at stuff, but they're great over there. So like love seeing them kind of do their thing and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, I think that was the main stuff on the show floor, right? I don't think I got a pizza slice at one point. It was decent.
Classic.
Anything
Yeah, I
else
mean,
I'm
there's
missing?
there's the signing area, which is in the back, which we're not, again, we don't really ever partake in any of that stuff. But like once you kind of enter sort of that main hallway and room, you kind of see like, okay, it's a little bit front loaded with some booths and some retailers and Vim vendors, and then you have in the background sort of that sort of grouping of lines for panels or not panels, pardon me, but for signings.
Photo ops and
Yeah.
signings, which if you guys
Anthony
have
Michael
never,
Hall was there. I
yeah,
saw him. Evil did not
yeah,
die that night, sadly.
yeah, it's always fun because even if you don't want to pay for an autograph or a photo, you can kind of walk by the autograph area. So if you're just looking to get a glimpse of someone, if that's something that you care about, you can just walk by the autograph part and there'll be lineups. And for autographs, I believe you just walk up to their line and you can pay when you get to the table. And then you can also pay extra for like a selfie if they're doing that. You always have to pay though. So and then you can actually buy a photo op. And Nevis and I were playing a fun game when we got home after the first night where we were playing higher or lower for people's photo ops. So like we were guessing how much they were charging people to take a photo with them. Never really been my thing. I don't judge anyone. If you want to make sure you meet someone and get a photo with them, it's your money, it's your disposable income, do whatever you want with it. I'm not judging you. Like it's not my thing. Like I just celebrity, I think both of us, Eric, we gladly have a conversation with someone, whether that's officially for the show or unofficially, just if you bump into someone and say, hey, I'm a big fan of your work, and talk to them for a bit. But we're not ones to get photos or autographs. So uh, if that's how you want to spend your money, power to you, but not really our thing. I think we can pivot then to the one panel we did go check out, which I'm glad we did this year, because last year we just checked out the show floor. There wasn't, much that we wanted to kind of go see. And the one panel we wanted to see last year was the Cobra Kai panel, and they all had to pull out of Fan Expo last year because I believe they were still shooting Cobra Kai at the time, or they were promoting the new season, right?
Well, that's the
Um,
other thing that happens a lot during Fan Expo every year is that
yeah.
you'll hear talents be announced, and then you'll get a lot of maybe the bigger names or people that are working more steadily canceling last minute, and that almost becomes a joke in itself. So that happens a lot. So I think like if anybody's going based on just like, meeting one person or getting an autograph signed by one person, you kind of have to have your expectations in check based on like, okay, well, anything could happen at the 11th hour, and that's just the way it is sometimes,
Yeah.
especially, well, even this year in particular, because I think one of the most fascinating elements of going to this panel was seeing how these three actors were going to talk about a Netflix show and not talk about the show in any capacity, because they are SAG actors. They are a part of that union, and that union right now, like the Writers Guild, is on strike. So going in there and seeing that, like I was thinking to myself, okay, it's one thing to talk about yourself or your interests outside of film and television or the work you're doing, but how can you sustain that for 30 to 40 minutes and kind of feel like you're getting your money's worth? Because they didn't open it. I don't This is the first panel I've been to for Fan Expo, and really I think ever, outside of like Q&A panels for film festivals. And so the thing that I noticed right away, or like when we were talking, you, Nevis, and we were thinking like, okay, like what's this going to be like if they open this up to the floor? Because it's one thing to control it on the stage, but if you open it up to the audience to come and ask a
It's
question.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, so they didn't have that with this panel
I'm
anyways.
sure not. They probably just closed it for all of Fan Expo, I'm assuming. So yeah, we went to the panel for Cobra Kai, but really it was just a conversation with Ralph Macchio, William Zabka and Yuji Okamoto. So yeah, we went thinking, going partly fascinated of being like, well, what are they going to talk about? Because we weren't sure what the rules of the strike were, where we're like, okay, can they talk about things from the past as long as it's not about Cobra Kai? So maybe they could talk about Karate Kid, but then we're like, no, Karate Kid was for a studio. That's one of the struck companies. So they probably couldn't talk about that. They're like, are they only going to talk about William Zabka's Oscar nomination for his short film that he worked on? Which was not brought up once. But Andrew Fung, who is from Kim's Convenience and Run the Burbs, he hosted the panel, and he brought the three gentlemen out. Nevis was very excited to see William Zabka in
Who
person,
wasn't?
which I was as well. And then we sat through this panel, which I'm with you, Eric, that I'm not Comic-Con. I'd go to the Hall H panels. I went to Comic-Con one time in San Diego, and Hall H was a lot of fun. But then that was always a mix of, here's some new footage, here's an announcement, here's the people from the movie who come out for a couple seconds and talk, and then there would be like a short Q&A at the end or something like that. But yeah, they scrapped the Q&A for this, and it was just a conversation between Andrew and the three gentlemen from Cobra Kai.
Not
But
talking about Cobra Kai.
yeah, it ended up being almost like 3-4 friends shooting the shit just about
It felt like a
life, and
podcast,
like,
really.
yeah, it really did. And
Dudes being guys, just hanging out, talking about sports, restaurants, their lives in general. Like Ralph Macchio kind of opened up a little bit about like his son working for the New York Islanders.
Yeah.
See, I'm not a sports guy, so that was a lot of the conversation. Or like there was a kind of fun, but also like you could tell like it was a little bit like yes or no kind of thing. And
who's the most likely to blank or whatever.
Yeah. And I really loved William Zabka's dry reactions to things. Like it just he's a very kind of, he seems very comfortable and just kind of having a casual conversation, whether it be on a stage or seemingly I think in person. Even like it just kind of felt natural to him, where I think Ralph Macchio specifically, there were times where it felt a little bit more mannered, or maybe he was thinking in his head where like, okay, he even mentioned it a couple times where it's like, I feel like I'm on like dancing on a landmine a little bit. And like there were certain things where he had to pull back a little bit more, even when he was talking about like the ebbs and flows of having that kind of career, where there are times where you're not working for long stretches. And I think this is a way of like him talking about the strike as well, where you don't have that support really, and you kind of have to find different avenues in order to sustain not only yourself but your family, and sort of finding new ways to kind of uh reinvent yourself, or have that downtime. They talked about having been in Toronto before, or having shot in Vancouver before, things like that. That was kind of like the pandering to the Canadian crowd in a way. But yeah, I think it was as good as it could have been, and it still was worth our time, and I think it still was worth the audience's time. And maybe like they felt more of a personal connection because they were sharing stuff that was not like deeply like it was small talk, but small talk in a way that kind of felt sincere, because it's like, okay, well, we only have this to talk about right now.
Yeah, and all three guys are very charismatic. And like, uh you could tell Ralph Macchio passionate about his family. Zabka was very funny. Yuji talking about how his love for sneakers and this restaurant. I thought it was funny. He kept bringing, it was like a plug for his restaurant every time that he would speak about something. He has I guess a restaurant in Seattle. um and yeah, it was an engaging conversation. Like, it was kind of a nothing conversation, and I don't think it was like necessary, but I think to your point, they did the best with what they could, right? Like they danced around things, asking, being like, oh, in previous work, or yeah, on set, on that,
Redacted.
like, yeah, on a show I worked on, or things like that. Like they wouldn't talk about specifics about anything, but they did dance around certain things of being an actor, or fight sequences versus dramatic sequences. So they did talk about acting. They did everything they could without specifically mentioning I work on Cobra Kai
Yeah. Or
or the
endorsing
Karate
anything
Kid.
that's
Yeah.
film or television related within their careers. They kind of kept it as um, neutral and as broad as possible when it comes to just their own lives. Like even William Zabka talking about his love for music, or you had this conversation just with these guys, kind of talking about knowing each other over the decades and what that
Yeah.
means to them. And I think that's why they were so comfortable together, because even though probably they didn't spend like every waking hour, but they've probably seen each other enough over the decades at conventions like this where they've
And
gotten to
especially
know
now
each
working
other.
on Cobra Kai together,
Yeah.
right? So like it might have been that they talked about that gap in between like, Karate Kid and Cobra Kai of without specifically talking about the gap between Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, of what they tried to do in the dark times. I think William Zabka called it or something like that, or
Yeah.
I forget what he called it,
But
but
that also goes to the
um
protest element of it, right? Where like
yeah.
that's them kind of advocating for the strike, because like I'm sure there were times in their lives where they needed residual checks or extra money that would have helped them, and they probably weren't getting it from, obviously streamers really weren't around in the late 80s, early 90s, or in the mid 80s, but you had major studios like Sony that were probably still making tons of money off of those Karate Kid films, even after the fact, as people were renting them at video stores, and they were being re-released on new formats like Blu-ray and DVD for the first time, and finding a new life even before YouTube kind of came around with it. So like I'm sure like those guys probably could have benefited from that money. And like even just like the restaurant stuff, again, I think that's just kind of interesting, where it's like the pressure to be not only an owner but a cook as well, and to be the head cook was a conversation that I felt actually added maybe a little bit more if you're thinking about becoming your own restaurateur or something like that, where that conversation kind of made you feel like the stress of it. And if you watch The Bear, or if you've watched any cooking show, it's like you can only
Yeah.
imagine how serious that is, especially if you are a smaller operation.
Yeah, and I think these guys don't take any of that for granted, to like for what you were saying too, is like, Yuji Okamoto had not necessarily had to, but after he worked not maybe super consistently, but he popped up in things here and there um consistently from Karate Kid Part 2 to today. But it was one of those things, probably being like, well, I need to pivot, like if I'm not getting a ton of roles, or sometimes there's a lot of actors that's not their main source of income, right? And that's to your point with what they're fighting for, is like they love doing it, but they have another job, because it's not like, not everyone is a you know super mega movie star that makes a ton of money, right? Like he popped up in stuff like he was in Truman Show and Pearl Harbor and Inception and things like that, but in small roles. But um, he obviously went and started a restaurant, and that was his main probably source of income. So I think it's even interesting now, him coming back to Cobra Kai, and was a guest in a couple things, but then a recurring character, probably in these last couple seasons. Him having more consistent work in the acting realm. And that's what's interesting about Cobra Kai, is like a lot of the people from the Karate Kid franchise, they were just known for the Karate Kid, right? Like, yes, they might have shown up in other things, but a lot of these people, they're going back to them after however many years it's been, and being like, I know you haven't really acted much, but would you come back and reappear in this show, right? Which I think is really, really interesting. So some of that lended to the conversation without specifically calling out um, you know, the strike. And well, they did talk about the strike, but not like the shows that they all work on. So I'm glad we did it. I had a good time. I think me, you, and Nevis like laughing along with the conversation. I'm definitely glad we did it, because there was a part where we're like, are we going to stick around? It's later in the day, and it made me really curious of how like the Scream panel went the night before, and some of the other big panels where people couldn't talk about the things that they work on, right? So
Yeah.
I guess this is hopefully the only opportunity you're going to have where that happens, so you're getting something a little bit different. It's not just plugging a show that they have or something like that, even though that conversation is interesting in itself, where you can kind of get into the nitty gritty of making the show, favorite moments, things like that. But hopefully this writer's strike will be done, and an actor's strike will be done by next Fan Expo. So this is kind of a little, flash in the pan. We got to hear an interesting conversation you might not get otherwise, that put a silver lining on it. Of course, pay your writers, pay your actors, end this fucking thing. But silver lining, it was an interesting conversation you might not be able to hear otherwise.
Yeah, and you just kind of felt like, oh, this is something that in any other year you wouldn't get, but on top of that you kind of felt like, okay, they are trying to give you something. Like, it's not just simply they're phoning it in, or they're just kind of like reading off of a script of things that they've been like, I'm sure they were told like beforehand what they can and can't talk about, and maybe they even like rehearsed it in their mind to keep a mental note of things. But it did feel genuine when you kind of got these three guys kind of like the conversation going. And I think it's also just because they've known each other for so long that it's easy for them to kind of just almost feel like it's just a hangout kind of vibe in a way. And I think that also kind of adds to even what the show is about in a way, because I think some of the best stuff in the show isn't necessarily the fighting or the staging, even though that stuff is a lot of fun and ridiculous and over the top. I think sometimes the best stuff in there is the inter-character connections and the dynamics between people in terms of their relationships and the character work in general. And you could see that camaraderie in these three guys as they were kind of having this conversation. And it didn't feel phony. Again, Ralph Macchio kind of felt a little bit more almost parental in a way, where he
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
he was trying to keep like
A little bit more reserved, right?
philosophical, but also trying to be like the guy that was like steering the ship and making sure everything was okay. Where like the way that like even William Zabka was just kind of like hanging out there was very chill. But like all three of them were really lovely to hear their stories, and I think it just made you appreciate the work without them talking about the work. Because again, what you were just talking about, there's like William Zabka, you know, is an Oscar nominee and has gotten work before Cobra Kai. He was in How I Met Your Mother in a few episodes here and there, but these
But
guys,
was about Karate Kid as well.
yeah, it's all tied to it. And it's unfortunate because William Zabka, we keep talking about him this way. It's like he's become such a great character actor on Cobra Kai, and I was hoping that somebody, and maybe it's just because of the scheduling of the show, or maybe he's just not interested, but like somebody would use him in something in an interesting way, and it hasn't happened yet, the way that like you've seen certain actors that are really well associated with certain roles, like someone like Kyle MacLachlan, who pops up in one of Steven Soderbergh's best movies with High Flying Bird, something like that, where it's like it's nice to be reminded that, one, they're good actors in the roles that they've played before, but maybe they've kind of created something new within something familiar. But then also it's like, hey, these other directors, like these guys are still out there doing their thing, use them for something, and it's not just simply gimmicky stunt casting either.
Yeah, I hope maybe once Cobra Kai is done, which we have one more season, which who knows when we'll get that now. I think they were shooting it or about to start shooting it right as the strike happened. So maybe when that's done, I hope we see someone give Zabka something with a little meat on it, even if it's an ensemble piece, like you're saying, like where he pops up in a smaller role, but like is something where he can kind of sink his teeth into it. Like seeing some auteur director kind of jump in and give him a bit part, I think could be really fun. And who that person will be, it's probably someone who's a fan of the Karate Kid or Cobra Kai, but um I'd love to see him pop up in something, or maybe he'll do something like direct something or write something after, right? Like he co-wrote and produced that short, right? That's what he
Yeah.
got nominated for. So, and he talked about a little bit too, that he was passionate about creating things and wanting to direct and write. So like
William
maybe,
Zabka's pool man.
I honestly, dude, like I hope once he's finished with Cobra Kai and he's made some coin, he's done 5-6 seasons of that show now, so I'm sure he banked quite a bit of money, especially when it went over to Netflix. I mean, I
Well,
think
you
he
would
paid.
hope so. I mean, I
um
think that's part of what the actors strike is too, right? To get that
yeah,
proper payment and those residual checks. And yeah, you would hope so, but you can also see like maybe he's not earning the kind of money he deserves.
Yeah, but I forgot in How I Met Your Mother, he had like a recurring role, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like almost like a whole season
Well, there is
kept
an
showing
episode
up,
with him
right?
and Kyle MacLachlan. That's why I mentioned
Yeah.
Kyle MacLachlan as well, where like
Oh,
you
because
get
he was the captain, right?
yeah,
Or
you get
captain.
typecast in a role that people will always associate with you, and then you kind of fall off the wayside for a while, but then you have a new generation of fans that grow up with the thing that you were best known for, and then those fans grow up and then they become filmmakers or producers and they remember you, and then you get like it's like Quentin Tarantino, right? Where Tarantino throughout his entire career has casted people that he grew up watching. That's
I'd
why
love to see Zabka pop up in a
well,
Tarantino
that's why
movie,
you
but
see people like, Pam Grier or the late great Robert Forster in Jackie Brown. It's because he grew up with those movies. And so there's got to be a filmmaker either now that's in their 30s or 40s that grew up with, the Karate Kid films and has seen Cobra Kai and knows that this person's out there and still good and actually is doing some really solid, nuanced work within something that is very familiar, but he's also just very funny. I think he has really good dry wit and comedic timing. So
I agree. So that's Fan Expo. I think that will wrap up that conversation. I always have a blast every year. I really highly suggest you give it a shot if you've ever been interested, or if you're worried about crowds and certain things like that. The hot tip is, if you can get in that preview time. I think it's only for the people who have the ultimate packages, like all 4 days. So that might be an issue, but Thursday is usually a pretty good day to go. Like it was a little bit busy. Um, Probably for that reason, maybe because other people were trying to do that. Friday evening though is the hot tip. Like it's open until 9 p.m. I think on Fridays, and if they continue with the same schedule. And I felt like when we started to walk around 5-6 p.m., like after the panel, it was pretty good, right, Eric? Like there
yeah,
was like a lot of room to walk around, but like early on Friday it was pretty busy as we were walking around. And then I'd avoid Saturday, and then maybe if you popped in on Sunday. But any of those days, if there's someone there that you want to see a panel for, it's worth it. The booths themselves are just a lot of fun. Like if you're not a comic book person or want to spend a ton of money, you can still walk around, explore the booths. Like there is a lot to do, and you're not going to see everything, right? Like there are other fun things. I used to love going to the sketch duels where it was two comic book artists against each other, and they'd have like the overhead projector like you used to have in school, and they'd be drawing on them, and they'd each draw the same character, and then you would choose a winner, right? And they would talk about their careers and stuff as they were drawing. Those are awesome to go to. Didn't get to do that this year, but those were always a blast. So yeah, I really think if you're interested, like Eric and I are gonna cosplay next year. My wife and I might cosplay. So
God, we're going through with this, aren't we?
it's gonna be fun, and I really do like going. And so if you're in the Toronto area, try to go to Fan Expo, or even in Ontario, people come in. Or if you want to go to a different convention, like Fan Expo has other ones that they do as well. But then also like Comic Con in San Diego. Like if you're into this stuff, it might seem overwhelming, but if you can afford to even just go one day, like I really do think you're with your people and you can talk to anyone. Everyone's pretty friendly, and like people watching is amazing as well. So definitely say go check it out.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. Like we don't dress up, so I think like that's something that maybe with the exception of maybe next year,
Well, we're gonna do
that
like the laziest costume, but like
yeah,
yeah,
that maybe you have to take more consideration in terms of like staying hydrated and things like that, because it does get a little hot in there after a while. So
good
if you're
water refill stations though. I
yeah,
will say I refilled cold water. That's all I want in these things, because half the time you like refill your water at the airport in those water bottle things, and it's like piss warm, and you're like, this is awful. But
yeah.
cold water in the water refill stations at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. So yeah. Um, Eric, do you want to quickly, like we're right on the hour mark, so we can wrap it here. But TIFF is in the next couple days. Why don't we talk a little bit about
Stop
the
threatening me.
festival?
Stop it.
You're about to do your package redemption. I did mine this year. this is really inside baseball because most of the people listening, I mean, we do have some press colleague friends who do listen and stuff like
Do
that.
they?
We
Jesus.
appreciate you.
I'm
There are
sorry.
people. Shut up. Um, but this year was interesting with the redemption. Like I found TIFF is in an interesting spot, right? Because we haven't talked about this, like Bell is leaving as the major sponsor after this year. They've had a couple high positioned people leave the company, a COO, a co-COO leaving. You had another COO or CEO leave in the last couple years before that. So there's been a lot of change, sponsors coming in and out. And then this year, I'm even noticing on the press side of things that, with ticket allotments. So for people that don't know, with our press badges, you can go see press and industry screenings, which are just on the schedule. You have a badge and they scan your badge before you go in. And those are unlimited. You can go to as many as you want. It's first come, first serve. Whoever gets there first and gets a seat, you get it. And once it's full, sorry, it's full. But they also give you 10 public tickets, which you could use for public screenings to add in your schedule. So you don't have to see everything at Scotiabank or Lightbox. Lightbox is amazing.
Scotiabank could
So
go to hell.
in previous years, that was never an issue. I never had a problem. Like the odd time if you were trying to see a movie at a smaller venue, or you try to get tickets after your redemption much later, like you'd get turned away. But for the most part, Eric, even you with your industry badge, like we've never really had an issue, right?
No.
Of redeeming tickets. It's always been like, yep, we got it. Yep, we got it. Yep, we got it. Which that is I'm very happy. We're privileged, and that's been
That's a
amazing.
first world problem if there ever is
Yes.
one.
Well, this is a first world problem that I'm talking about, but this year was different in the sense of it feels like the press allotment is much less than it was in the past. And that might be them going, we can't give away this many quote unquote free tickets to public showings, especially premium showings where they can sell those tickets upwards of, I think they're selling them $50 to $75, right, for a premium ticket. So, what I assume is that there's just much less allotment this year. Cause like I went through and picked my movies today, had to do a panic pick because, a lot of the stuff I wanted wasn't available. So I kind of just panicked and picked a bunch of movies. I did get a lot of stuff I do want to see. We'll just probably be seeing it either having to go to a PNI or seeing it later in the festival, which, in our industry, being first is a important thing, right? Because or being one of the first people,
It's a
because
form of
then
entitlement, though.
it is, but it also, for people who want to build their audience and you want people to listen to our show, Eric, like it is
Sure.
important to get it out as soon as you possibly can, right? Like you want, selfishly, for us to be successful, you want to be one of the first people to see something. But I'm going back on that. For me and you, we're also like, you know what? If we see it during the festival and we're not one of the first people to talk about it, that's also okay. The people who want to listen to us will listen to us.
And if they want our
Thankfully.
opinion on it, they'll come to it. But I also understand what you're talking about, because that's very
Yeah.
much what a festival is, right? It's about the first people that get to see something and kind of make a claim on it, or make
Yeah.
the that final verdict being the first verdict, and sort of, setting the stage of how maybe a movie will be perceived moving forward, or
Yeah.
will they get their name on on a poster, or on an ad or a TV spot or something like that, as Matt tries to slap a fly, I believe, or a fruit
Should
fly
have
or
got
some
some
sort of bug.
chopsticks, like Karate Kid reference.
Yeah, and so that's a part of it as well. Like, that's the one part I'm not the biggest fan of, because it does feel like it is a game at that
Oh,
point, and it's
absolutely. I'm with you. When it
yeah.
gets exhausting and like I don't want to be part of that, but also subconsciously I do, because I do want to be one of the first people to talk about something, because that I do
You
think
want
that
the hits.
that's how people who aren't familiar with us will get, they're searching on YouTube or they're searching on podcast services and they go, oh, they have a review for The Boy and the Heron, or Hitman or Next Goal Wins or whatever. So like, but then you get to a point where I'm like, you know what, I just want to see the movies. We'll talk about them. People will either listen or they won't, and that's fine with us. Like
Yeah.
it's I still think, you know, people will be looking for people with varied opinions on these movies throughout the entire festival. So it's just different, which is totally fine. If you want our whole thoughts on the festival lineup, you can go listen to that long ass episode we recorded a couple weeks ago. But um, it's just it feels a little different this year when it comes to the redemption. But it is what it is. We'll see in 40 minutes if it's a graveyard when you go in, or they'll be like, "Yep, we actually opened up a whole bunch more tickets. Here you go." And like, I'd be very curious to see um you know what's available when you pick yours, but I'm excited for the festival nonetheless. And like, I did get, you know, there's only maybe one movie that I won't be able to see that I really wanted to see. It was probably up there in my most anticipated, and I don't think I'm gonna have a chance to see it, which is a little bit of a bummer. And it's doesn't have, it has a Canadian distributor, but it doesn't have an American one yet. So in the American one's obviously going to take the lead on when it gets released. So it could be a little while before I see it, but and that's Hitman, the Richard Linklater movie. But I'm gonna try to make it work. Like, who knows? But right now it doesn't. It's not looking good. Like that's, and there's always one of those. Like I remember going back even to um each TIFF, I kind of have one of those movies. I feel like where it's like I wanted to see it, but it just didn't really work out. And the one, God, the Clint Eastwood movie with Matt Damon,
Hereafter.
Hereafter. I remember that being one that I really wanted to see. Um, and it only, remember at TIFF, it only had like one screening. Do you
Yeah.
remember this?
Yep.
Like, and I remember being really disappointed that I didn't get into that screening. And then there's always one or two of those each TIFF. So I guess Hitman might be that one for me this year. So
Yeah, and you've got a lot going on coming up soon, so you're also juggling the festival and other things as well.
yeah.
So it's kind of like you're you're putting yourself through the ringer a little bit as well. So you know you're making it work as best you can, and I think that's all that anybody could ask. And you're not accountable to anybody but yourself when it comes to this show. You know, like we're not answering to some sort of boss or corporate figure telling us you need to see all of these movies and you need to have reviews at these deadlines, or you know, you need to have these kind of
Well,
ways
that's
of right
great. Yeah.
ways of writing reviews, or kind of you know, the way that people sometimes write reviews in terms of like capsules and things like that. So you know, like it's nice to not have that stress, but you do put it on yourself as well, because there are movies that you want to see. And I think this year I'm kind of relieved that if there's some problems, which I'm sure there will be come 6 o'clock, once I go through my redemption window, but I rather it be this year than last year. And even though we had problems last year, it was not because of you know, the availability. It was just more of a technical error, where this year it does seem to change. And I don't know if it has something to do with Bell leaving, in terms of TIFF trying to redeem profit themselves in a way where they'll be selling more of those critic tickets maybe that were allotted for press to the public, so they can make a little bit of additional money to you know, counterbalance what they're losing post TIFF, and what they'll probably be looking for in the interim. And I keep thinking about that joke you made where it's like, you know, the TIFF Taco Bell light box, where it'd be perfect because they could keep the bell part in there.
That's what I
So
mean. You just got to put a taco in front of it and you're good. Yeah, man, we'll see. I don't know. Like, we're not going to talk about any specific things we've seen. We've seen about 10 films each. We're going to save that for the individual reviews that we're going to be recording over the next, God, I don't know how we're going to do all this, but, we'll do it. I like the on the fly recording and that we do during the festivals. So it should be fun. I am looking forward to it, even balancing everything that I'm balancing. And I, I said this, that it's a good year where if you listen to our preview show where
blimp,
I'm like,
Goodyear blimp.
I'm not, I'm excited for the festival, but there's not like that one movie where I'm like, oh my God, if I don't get that, I'm going to be devastated. Like The Boy and the Heron was probably that. I did get a ticket to it. There is a press screening that we can try to go to. And I mean, again, these are first world problems. There are a lot of people who want to go to this festival and buy packages or buy single tickets. And I know how much of a struggle that is too. I did that for years and years leading up. I had a Facebook memory the other day of the year that there was Black Swan and what was the other ticket that was on that image that I've sent? But and then it had the old paper package where you had to fill it out on paper and send it in and drop it off. And like, I do miss those days a little bit, but those were hell because you had no tiffer, you had nothing like that, and you had to write your second, third choices, and everything needed to work out together. So I know that hell as well. So ticketing is going to be tough no matter where it is. So hopefully you get to the movies you want to see. If not, remember, it's not the end of the world. A lot of these things are, have distributors and are coming out. And as I get older, I'm like, it's okay. I'll see it later. And like, I'll see it like at the end of the year. It's fine. Like, I just want to have a good time during the festival. And it seems like we have some open nights and stuff, which is kind of nice because we can't go to many. Like, I remember last year they gave us 20, didn't they?
I think so, yeah.
And I feel like we were at public screenings every fucking night, like 2 or 3 of them, right? So like,
especially in
year,
2019, like I felt like
yeah,
by the time we got to the end of the 2019 festival, we were just like running on empty. There was a point where we were recording, reviews for Ford versus Ferrari and A Hidden Life, the Terrence Malick movie.
yeah.
And it just kind of felt like we were sitting in the Intercon, no, not the Intercon Hotel, the what's
Isn't
the
it the
one that's
lobby
that,
of E1 or whatever?
no, what
Or
was the
like
headquarters for TIFF?
Hyatt?
The Hyatt. So we were sitting in that like corner that's like that office downstairs. It's
Yeah.
where like the restaurant is in the bathroom. And I just remember sitting on the chair thinking like, oh God, when is this going to end? And I can sleep.
I love it though, man. Like, yeah, it's, but if we have some nights free, that means hang out, record,
Get some
maybe,
food,
get
just
some
like,
food, some
yeah,
drinks and stuff like
pace
that. So it
yourself
should
a
be,
little bit more.
I'm excited. So stay tuned. We'll have a buttload of reviews dropping over the next 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks. It'll probably go into the week after TIFF and stuff like that too. We'll try to spread them out as much as possible because we know we want people to not be overwhelmed, but we're going to try to keep them short as well. But it's Eric and I, so short could mean anything.
Yeah.
could mean 10 minutes, could mean 45. So who knows? It just depends on the movie. But thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. Please go check out our other show, Untitled Movie Reviews, where we have reviews up for Bottoms, Ahsoka, Gran Turismo, among other things. So go check those out. One-stop shop for everything. Head over to Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies, and you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric March, and you can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene. There's a new episode coming very soon, which has Shaquille Lambert and Matt Rohrbeck talking about the fall festival season. What a surprise. And the strikes that are going on right now, but it quickly turns into an all-out sawfest. It's Sodomacene, and it's fun, but
like you said, sodomy scene.
Sodomy scene. It felt like that a little bit on my end, but it was a lot of fun, and I thank you and Shaq for doing that. But once it's out there and broadcasted, I'll send it out. It was nice getting back into the studio again. It had been almost 3-4 years, so doing something in person and just talking to two people on a makeshift set was kind of nice, instead of just always doing it like this, which I just smacked my mic. So it's that's the kind of stuff you love the most. And social media wise, you can follow me at EM6211. We have tons of social media sites for Untitled as well that you can
There's
find.
too many now. You'll find us everywhere. We're on X. We're sort of on Threads. We're
not on Mastodon.
We're rough, we're coarse, we're everywhere.
We're keeping it raw and real.
Until next time, keep it
fudge and power tools, baby.
Bye, everyone.